audio platform upon which we will endeavor to centralize and showcase stories and information related to the lifting of historical and non-historical stones and the ongoing development and reemergence of stone lifting culture. All right, welcome to episode 5 of the Stones of Strength podcast. On this episode, you'll be able to listen to a great conversation that we had with our really good friend, Troy, who is at Beard and Boulder on Instagram and is one of the founding members of the Edmonton Stones of Strength, in addition to being both a physical and mental powerhouse. So between Troy, Dave, and myself, we sort of talk about training for stones, training with stones, accessory movements, different approaches to training techniques for different body parts, or how to break down and train for specific aspects of stone lifting in absence of having actual physical access to training with stones. But before we get to the episode, there's been a ton of awesome things happening in the stone lifting community, both sort of locally and afar. And so we want to make sure we touch on some of those things and give them the shout out and the coverage that we think they deserve, because as much as we appreciate incredibly when people reach out to let us know that this podcast has helped to sort of encourage and inspire them to get further involved in stone lifting or elevate their stone lifting games, there are so many things happening in the community that are equally as inspiring to Dave and I. So we want to make sure we give them, take the time to show our appreciation. So I'll throw it over to Dave to talk about the gathering that just happened recently.
Yeah, and it looked absolutely amazing, and it's definitely a dream to go compete there sometime at the Scottish Gathering. The event put on, it just looks incredible from all angles, between the feats of athleticism, the events themselves, the community, the encouragement and everything. It's just the entire event looked electric. And, we saw some huge feats of strength. We saw the third Stoltman brother lifting the Dinnie Stones for the first time. There was, what was the gentleman's, Ashraf?
Yeah, Harris Ashraf, who became the first man of Indian descent to ever lift the Dinnie Stones. And it was so cool to see that, when he got that successful lift. From the videos I've seen, the place just exploded. There was hugs everywhere. People were cheering. And it was, a comparable response to when Big Laws set the new world record for the Dinnie Stone, side-by-side Dinnie Stone walk. And so just to see that the outpour of support coming from the local community to stone lifters that are, amateurs, professionals, locals, people coming in from afar, it was just such a heartwarming thing to see. And I made me very, very proud to be part of such an awesome community. So.
That's very well said. And yeah, it just looked incredible, completely incredible. And Brett Nichols doing a few more reps in the Dinnie Stones, and he's sitting at, I believe, 499 lifts, which is amazing. And he's actually going to be joining us in the podcast next week. So it'll be fantastic to talk to him. Brett is just such a gentleman and such a nice guy, and just a great advocate for the stone lifting community as a whole. It looks like there was a ton more footage recorded for the upcoming documentary that'll be out next year. The Rise and Fall and Rise of Scottish Stone Lifting, put on by Maximum Iron. So just kind of a little fuel for the fire for that. That'll be very, very, very excited about that.
Yeah, just sort of the slow drip of Instagram videos coming out too about some of the stone tours that were happening in support of getting footage for that documentary. It's just amazing to see hats off to the Scottish stone lifting community. You guys continue to push the bar as far as getting out, lifting and appreciating your local stones of strength, as well as sort of celebrating it with your local community, as well as those of us on Instagram.
There's a whole bunch more guys shoulder the Ardvlick too,
yeah,
which is
crazy.
Awesome. And you see in Martin Lacey's come out and lift these stones.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic stuff.
It's one of those things where you get these breakthrough moments that advance at least sort of the what would be considered a physical possibility within certain sports, right? You get way back when the first man ran a 4-minute mile. That was thought to be a physical impossibility. And now, you high school kids that are doing that. So you have these moments where, the Ardvlick is shouldered for the first time, and it shows people in the community that that's a possibility. They're training towards it and achieving lifts of that historic stone to shoulder, which is amazing.
It is. And even just yesterday, Eddie Hall riding his motorcycle all the way up to the Strathmore of Durness and doing a lift of that. It was really, really cool to see that. And he's such a great advocate of strongman. And if he gets involved in natural stones, and it was good to see him look like he set it down with respect too.
Yeah, it's awesome. Another event we wanted to shout out was the recently completed Battle for Mercia 2. So this is something that is put on by a gentleman whose Instagram handle is BTB_sleeves, because he owns the company BTB Sleeves, who, if you're looking to get some sleeves to wear while doing stone lifting, he makes stone lifting specific sleeves, whether for natural stones or for lifting Atlas stones. So check him out if you're looking to get yourself a pair of sleeves. And it looks like the Battle for Mercia 2 is held at Bishton Hall in the UK, and it was kind of a bit of a fair as well as a competition, so had sort of a Viking style village set up. There were some battle reenactments going on, and then there was also strongman and strongwoman events put on that centered around lifting natural implements. A lot of it was around lifting natural stones or ringed stones, doing various movements with them. So it looked like an awesome event.
On the 19th, we also saw Maine having the Highland Games Festival where they did traditional Scottish stone lifting. They also introduced their Maine lifting stones, which is a Dinnie style lift. And actually, they're going to be adding that to our Modern Stones of Strength map. So that's something else that we wanted to discuss. There are other stone lifting maps out there. Obviously, Old Man of the Stones is probably the most well-known one, and that features primarily historical lifting stones. Now there are some modern ones mixed in there, and there's also on liftingstones.org they also have another map with some modern as well as some historical stones. But we didn't want to try and the map that we're doing is not to compete against those guys, not to step on anyone's toes, because we have nothing but the most respect for both of those maps and the gentlemen that run them. But we just wanted to start something that is specifically and only modern stones of strength. So if there's other little communities like our Edmonton Stones of Strength pop up, we can get it on there. We have the Utah Stones of Strength. We have the Pennsylvania Stones of Strength put up by Keystone Lifting. We have a couple in the UK as well. So it's slow, but it's growing. And the point of this map we wanted to start up is that anybody can get involved. If you find a stone, you love the stone, there's a story for it. If it's a personal testing stone or just one you think people will like, we can get that up on our map and we can help build this, right? It has to be one that you're open to letting people lift, because that's the whole point of it. Is if you got involved in stone, like the way that I look at it is if you got involved in stone lifting and you wanted to find a way to test yourself, you could reference our map and you could see, okay, there's 3 stones in my city, and there's 10 stones in my province or my state, and it gives you a chance to go out and test yourself, because not everybody has the time or the money or the opportunity to go travel to try the Icelandic stones or the Irish stones or the Scottish stones. And so if we build a community of stone lifters locally, and I say, locally coming from Canada, but the whole point is if we can connect people with challenges in their areas, it'll really help grow things. And so the map is just getting started. I think we maybe have about 20 stones on it so far. You can find it in the link in our bio on our Instagram page. If you're interested in getting your stones on there, you can reach out through a message and we'll reference you to our email. We'll give you the information, but basically what we want is to obviously send us the GPS coordinates of the stone that you're interested in or stones you're interested in sharing with us. If you want to weight recorded, you're going to have to send us a video of it being weighed, because it is very important that we see that, because there's no guessing. You could just say it's a small, medium, large stone. We're totally fine with that. But if you want to weight, it has to be recorded with like a picture and just a tiny little blurb. It doesn't have to be more than a sentence or two, but just the name of it, if there's any significance whatsoever, just to give people some information. And we're hoping as a community that we can slowly build all of this up. There's tons more stones that I know that are going to be put on right away. But if you're listening, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, if you find this stuff is important and fun and you want to help build your community there, this is just one of the potential outlets that we're trying to offer in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you touched on a really important part there is the fun part, right? For those of you who like to get out and walk the riverbanks, hike the mountains, scour through the woods near your house to find cool new stones to challenge yourself, or you think might be cool challenges for other people, here's an opportunity to get those documented and listed so other people can come out and enjoy them as well. So,
and that's something that I touch on in the podcast, but just the amount of hours I've spent in our river valley with a backpack trying to find stones, it is so much fun. And so really, if it's something you like to do, don't be afraid to go for a hike, to go for a walk, whatever you can to find this stuff. Because it is, as Dale touched on the episode, it's a treasure hunt. We all know there's a million heavy stones out there, but not all of them are great lifting stones. So the actual process of looking for a very, very good lifting stone is a ton of fun. And when you find it, it's very, very rewarding.
Yeah. Or find a stone that could be just an average lifting stone and develop a unique way to lift it, whether it's to a plinth or, as we've seen on one of the stones called the Stone Through the Wall in Wales. heaving a stone through an ancient damaged wall. So, Get creative, right? Get creative. Speaking of finding and creating stones of strength and community around that, our guest on this episode is our good friend Troy, who is, as we said before, at Beard and Boulder Beard _and_ Boulder on Instagram. And he is one of the founders of the Edmonton Stones of Strength. He also hosts the Alberta Strongest Viking competition in Edmonton, Alberta every year, which is a strongman competition that is focused around using natural and, for the most part, unaltered implements, stones and logs, for the most part, in the competition. And has created an incredible community and experience around that competition. He's, an incredibly experienced and accomplished stone lifter. He almost trains primarily on stone. So when we decided to have the idea of an episode where we talk about training, because a lot of people have listened to our past episodes and they've enjoyed the stories and the experiences that we cover, but they wanted us to dig a little further into training. We thought Troy was the perfect complement to come on to this podcast, especially as a complementary style to the way that David trains, which is a mix of, it's very analytical. It's a mix of using typical gym lifts as well as stone lifts. Troy is real heavy on the stone side of things, so together they provide a pretty all-encompassing view on how you can elevate your stone lifting. So without further ado, the great and powerful, great beard, powerful man, Troy. All right, episode 5 of the Stones of Strength podcast. Got a bit of a different format that we have today. We'll call it the Stone Circle format because we have in-house with us one of the members of our stone lifting community, not just any member. So really one of the original members of our stone lifting community and one of the sort of godfathers of the Edmonton Stones of Strength. And I'll let David get into the backstory a little bit here, but really, in essence, in absence of Troy's influence of David and sort of helping create the Stones of Strength, this podcast wouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't be doing this right now. So in many ways, thank you very much, Troy. I'll let
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny because I was trying to think back to the first time that I saw you, and Rory had sent me. Rory's a mutual friend of ours, and it was, I think, right when the competition was coming back after COVID. And he'd sent me a video of you lifting a stone. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. This guy is strong as hell. And then it clicked. I'm like, shit, this guy is under 231 in our category, isn't it? And Rory's like, yep. And we're both like, oh, no. And so we started just creeping on your Instagram page. And we're looking at all your videos and how strong you were. And we were like, oh, shit, here we go.
Someone poisoned this man.
Yeah, that's right. This guy's going to be a problem. But it actually has been quite the opposite of that. You've been the opposite of a problem. You've become a very, very good friend of ours. And as Dale mentioned, this podcast, the Edmonton Stone Strength, none of that would be around if it wasn't for you and your competition, Alberta Strongest Viking. So if you want to get us started here, Troy, maybe give us a bit of your origin story and then get into what got you into stone lifting and then maybe led you into Alberta Strongest Viking.
Sweet, yeah. I won't bore you with the first 20 years of my life. But, like a lot of people, started in powerlifting. I'm pretty sure I watched a Crazy Larry Wheels Instagram video, and I was like, I really want to lift heavy stuff like that. And I was living in Winnipeg at the time, and I started powerlifting. I was about a $185. I gained literally 70 pounds in a year. I trained just obviously powerlifting is the 3 static lifts, and then I drove down to Chicago, did a USPA meet, placed 3rd in the 105 kilo class. I think I deadlifted 635, benched 400, squatted 530. I came home. The gym I was training with at the time, a brick house in Winnipeg, they had a little small strongman corner. I was training there. I was getting a little bit bored of powerlifting, so then somebody's like, hey, come and try this log. And I strict pressed at 245 on a log the very first time that I tried to do it.
Sounds right.
I really went head first into the strongman thing. Around that time, I moved from Winnipeg to Edmonton, I signed up at Evolve, started doing strongman, found out that the provincials were happening, started training for that. 2 weeks later, COVID, everything shut down. Thus leads to the origin of the stones. You know, sitting at home, the gyms were closed. I was like, I really need to train. You know, and I also happened at the same time to come across Full Sturker, Stoneland, those documentaries like so many of us have. And I literally went to Costco, bought a 4-wheel little cart, went to a school park and stole a rock. And yeah, that's basically how it happened. And, you know, I was lifting that stone in the underground parkade until I got my warehouse. Right. And then I started just collecting stones. Both of you guys have seen, I've got, 25 boulders inside my warehouse, which is, has been a great tool. Yes, and also the place where I hosted Alberta Strongest Viking, which is, coming out of powerlifting and strongman and seeing the formats of those competitions and kind of, there's not really a brotherhood in those, and it's kind of, testy, and people kind of are, it's just a different mindset. And so I wanted to create a competition that not only let people try something new and primal and traditional, but also just fun. Like, come out, do something cool for you, not for anybody else. Mm-hmm. And so, this year was the third installment of Alberta Strongest Viking, and yeah.
Yeah, and just on the note of your Strongest Viking competitions, I think you're right. Like, just the different environment there is fantastic. I've done not a ton, but quite a few powerlifting meets and then strongman meets, and just the environment that's at your events is different. I like just thinking, especially this year, this last one. Sorry, the amount of chirping and laughing and hilarity that was going on. Yeah. It just brought a levity to it that you don't find in other competitions. Everybody tried their hardest. Everybody was competing very, very aggressively, but it was fun. And the lines that guys were throwing out, it was just a totally different type of environment. And it's kind of a neat competition, just on its own, like that side of it. I try to explain it to people, and I say it's kind of like where strongman crosses over almost with Highland Games, because it's got elements of both, but there's their own implements to it. So it's just a really, really cool competition. So I've really enjoyed those, and I think everyone has.
That was my first ever strongman type event, and I was, like, to David's point, so surprised. Like, all the guys were incredibly strong, and they were trying their hardest, but at the same time, they were supporting everyone else, cheering each other on. It was just like, after that first lift, the stress just kind of disappeared because everyone was just there having fun. And I guess I also was like, I'm not going to embarrass myself. I was able to get the log up, so then sort of the pressure was off, and we had an absolutely incredible time. And I'm wondering, both of you are so entrenched in our local stonelifting community, but also in contact with a lot of people internationally. And I've been trying to figure out, because even just by way of this podcast, interacting with a lot of people, the stonelifting community seems to be made up of a bunch of very, very approachable and humble people. And I was trying to figure out, like, why is that? And let me know if you think that this is accurate or completely off base. But I think, like, there are fewer things, at least that I've done, that are more humbling than lifting stones. So if you aren't already by nature a humble person, or someone who is comfortable with being humbled often and ferociously, then after trying to lift stones, understand, you could deadlift 500 pounds. You might struggle with a 250 pound stone. If you're not okay with that reality, you're not coming back to do it again.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's just how we as stone lifters are built. We're very weird. Two, we have that level of, like, discipline and drive where failure doesn't really affect us in a negative manner, and it drives us more. Yeah. And so, that whole aspect of, you can lift 500 pounds on a deadlift but struggle with 250, that's okay. Yeah. Everybody should expect that. And yeah, it's just the way that the stones are. It's the way that the tradition is. You just have to be okay with failure. And that kind of leads into the topic of the conversation tonight, which is how we train for stones and how we progress and then how we get better over time.
Yeah, and just to touch on your point about it, it being humbling. And, if you do heavy deadlifts, obviously that hurts your body. It hurts your nervous system. And your hands can get sore. But when you do stones, like, if you do a really hard session, I come home and I go to jump in the shower and my forearms are torn up, my hands are sore, my shoulders have broken blood vessels all over from shouldering. Like, you just look like you've seen a war, and it's awesome. And Dale, like, you got at Troy's competition, you got cauliflower ear from shouldering a stone, and like it beats your body up. And again, it's so humbling, and it's, I know we're going to touch on the Edmonton Stones of Strength quite a bit here today, but we have so many new people come out, and it's fun to watch people fall in love with it and to be humbled by it. And there was a fellow that came out, and I don't remember his name, but he was a bit of an Olympic lifter, and he had all these plans. We told him the weights of some of the stones, and he's a very nice guy by all means, but talking about, okay, well, I'll put this one overhead and I'll do this with this one and this with this one, and he just got his ass handed to him by the stones. And he was completely humbled. And this is a guy, I think he said he'd been training for at least 10 years in strength, and so he knows what he's doing, and he was a strong guy, but it's just they're their own specialty. And they require their own set of skills. And most people, with maybe the exception of you, Dale, can't just walk into it and lift near 300 pounds the first time. You're an exception to the rule.
Some pent up frustration coming out.
No, man, that's you're different than most.
No, I don't know. Speaking of community, before we jump into the topic for this evening about the strength training. The two of you were the ones who founded and started the Edmonton Stones of Strength, which is our sort of local stone lifting group. We have our place that we go and meet on Saturdays and train, which is called the Granite Garden during the fair weather months. And then when winter casts its very long and dark and cold shadow over Edmonton, which is about 6 months of the year, it's at Troy's warehouse where we go and we meet on Saturdays to train. So how did you two first connect and really create this idea of the Edmonton Stones of Strength?
Yeah, I don't remember the specific moment, Troy. I don't know if you do, man.
I actually don't. I think it was around the time of the 2020 Alberta's Strongest Man provincials for the strongman, when you were talking about how Rory was introduced to, like, he saw me at the gym.
Yeah.
And I think through Rory, we kind of met, and I think we talked over Instagram a little bit. After I started getting into the stones more specifically.
Yeah.
And I think, you just came and had a session, and it's been off to the races ever since. So.
Yeah, I think my first stone session, well, for sure the first stone session I ever did was with you. The only time I lifted, because I obviously knew about stone lifting before that. Before we'd met, I had Dinny rings and I was training on that, but I was less interested in the natural stone lifting side as much as the Dinny side. And then I came over, and I think my first stone session, I lapped your 375. I didn't stand with it, but I got it, and I just remember going, "This is awesome. This is it." Like it clicked for me. And then, obviously, I competed in your competition, went from there. But I think it was, the summer after your, your first competition, that stone. I think we were discussing maybe it was Stoneland or Full Sturker. And then combined our interest in the historical stones with Ryan Stewart doing his own Utah Stones of Strength. I think we were bouncing ideas, being like, man, there's no reason we can't do something like this here.
Yeah.
Right? And then the snow started melting, and then we just started going out. Sarah had found that big pile of rocks, and that's where we found the Homestead Stone, and that's where it kind of started. And then by sheer luck, just, Dale and I live 2 minutes up from where the Granite Garden is, and that's just a bizarre, we follow a lot of people on Instagram when it comes to stone lifting, and I can't think of any page or people I've seen that have access to as many stones that we have there. Like, just whatever happened with the glacier, Dale, this is more your department.
Yeah.
That dropped an unbelievable amount of liftable stones right in one area.
Right in one bank, and it's on the bend of the North Saskatchewan River. So I think that those are glacial erratics that were then aggregated and deposited as Glacial Lake Edmonton was draining. I could be wrong. I've tried to reach out to some folks who would know more than me, and I haven't heard anything back. But I think that's why, regardless, they are there by way of glacial processes. So
yeah, and it's interesting because, like, I spent the first winter after I stole my first rock from a school, and then I literally spent money on Kijiji, which is like a local buy and sell, for a literal landscaping stone. But I had a hell of a time in my first winter trying to discover and find any rocks to bring back to the warehouse, and like we ended up going to the landscaping company like a number of times and literally just buying stones so that we could train.
That's an option for people too, right? Like, you don't have to. It's personally, I've found that it means more if you go and find one. But if you don't have that option, go to a landscaping store, tell them what you're doing. And, they gave us a great discount because they're like, these weirdos just want to lift them, and they gave a huge discount. So
weren't you and Roy were out in the yard lifting the landscaping stones, and
Troy,
Troy, you were there too, and the guys came out and were like, look at these knuckleheads, like, what are they doing? And they got the manager, and you guys got them for like a quarter of the price had they been selling them to someone to stick them in their garden.
I think they're like, you guys need these more than we do. So and then offered us a job.
Yeah, they definitely offered us a job. They're like, if you want to load these, we'll give them to you for like $20.
Yeah, it was unreal. But the point is that, everyone out there, if you don't have access to natural stones, like we're fortunate to, go to a landscaping place, you can get access to stones.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm just speaking for what it's like here. I obviously don't know what it's like
Stealing
internationally.
from the school.
Stealing from
Did you ever put that one back?
No, that's my favorite stone. That's my
Is it the 260?
That's my 260 shouldering stone. That's why I'm so good with that one, because I've had it for like 3.5 years.
Maybe dialed with that, but
well, this is a perfect opportunity to sort of segue into some, the topic, which is training for stones, but not necessarily training with stones. And so we did put it out to everyone on the page, if they had questions, to let us know that the two of you would want to field. And one of the most common ones we got was, how do you train for stone lifting if you don't have access to stones? And there are other things. So if you want to even start, with what are complementary in gym exercises that you've both used to great effect in order to increase your strength for either specific components for stone lifting or just stone lifting in general? Troy, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, me and Dave, you're going to find out very quickly that we train almost completely opposite, as well as lift stones complete opposite, but we still accomplish the same things.
We do, yeah.
For me, what I've noticed in my training and what has made me a better and stronger stone lifter is core, forearms, and mobility, right? Like the ability, I think where people lack is in their core strength. So if you're talking about doing things in gym, I would suggest a lot of, front squats, Zercher squats, things that, activate the core as well as your legs and your extension and your drive off the floor. The other thing that I do on a regular basis when I'm not training stones is I literally have a wooden dowel with a weight with a string, and I just rip forearms and wrists constantly. If you're watching TV and you're sitting there, sets and sets and sets both ways, kill your wrists and forearms, because a lot of guys are very strong, but their grip is shit. I came off powerlifting, I couldn't grab anything. I did, even after doing strongman for a year, but my grip went through the roof once I started doing stones more, focusing on those forearms. So for me, it's core and forearms.
Yeah, that's a great point. I even noticed in Scotland when Dave and I were there doing our stone tour, a lot of their stones are spherical and quite smooth. So you really have to have good wrist strength and good squeeze. And for me, that was my point of failure for the most part, especially on the Ardverlick, which was the only one. I got to my knees a couple times. I couldn't get to my lap because I just didn't have that wrist strength or that squeeze strength that was required. So yeah, Dave, same question.
Yeah, so I had a whole bunch of stuff I was going to say. I don't know if it's good to get into it now or if you want me to. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to just take the mic for a couple minutes here. I'm going to do my best to be thorough but also concise. Just one of the things, like we're going to get to a lot more questions here, but a lot of people have reached out and specifically asked, how do I train specifically? I know Troy
train
gets
like a caveman.
Well, not entirely. A little more calculated, but like there's obviously a beautiful simplicity to stones, and I'm not trying to overcomplicate it here, but I think you can get to a certain level just by doing certain things, unless you're a freak like Troy, who's amazing at just stones. But I thought instead of me telling, a lot of people ask how it is I train, what do my programs look like, and all that, those kind of questions. And, there are many, many, many ways to get strong at stone lifting. The way Ryan Stewart is different than the way the Moldy Shed Boys do it, which is different than Jamie Gorey and Sean Urquhart, and all these guys train differently. So I thought instead of me breaking down, one of my training sessions or talking about how many times a week I do stones, which I can definitely get into, I thought that I would maybe try and do my best to give everyone a bigger picture of what the elements that I feel are important to stone lifting. And then if that information makes sense to you, then you can apply that information to your training. So almost, teach a little bit more about the bigger picture from my point of view. And, Troy, you might not agree with me, and Dale, you might not agree with me, and a lot of other people out there might find a different way. But this is just my observations, and it's worked for me. So what I've done is I've broken it down into 4 categories that I think make it easy to understand it. There's the muscles, the movement, the skill or technique, and then the anaerobic capacity or the grit. So if we're going to look at the muscles, the reality is if your muscles are not strong enough to lift the stone, you're not going to be able to lift the stone. Obviously, that is simple, but it really is that plain and simple. But stone lifting requires all the muscles in the body. So I can't break down every single one of them, but the 3 things, if I were to do 3 things that I think are important and maybe missed by some people, are the lower arms, the upper back, and the hips. So when I'm speaking about lower arms, obviously your forearms, your wrist, your hands, and your fingers. But I personally feel, same ideas with what Troy was just saying, is the wrists. The wrists are very, very underutilized. I was chatting with a local strongman. He's a professional strongman, and he was telling me about how stones are his weakest point. And I said, well, what do you do for wrist training? And he goes, what do you mean? I don't do wrist training. That sounds weird. And he said, like, he's a professional strongman. He's always been trained by guys higher than him. And he said that what his coaches say is grip, 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 but nobody focuses on the wrists. If you don't have the wrists to lock in on a stone, you're not lifting that stone. Yeah. Like, Troy, what's the gray stone we lifted the other day? That Dale and I found it, and then you and I lifted it. I guess it was probably a couple months ago now, not the other day, pardon me. But I think it's like 395 pounds or something.
Yeah, it was right around 4. Yeah.
Right around 4. And that stone has some of the worst handles. It's slippery, and you're basically wrist locking damn near 400 pounds. So if you don't have those wrists, you have no chance of lifting certain stones. So blast your lower arms. If you need good insight for that, I would highly recommend going to Raspberry Ape, Dan Strauss's page. He is a high-level, like multiple black belt jiu-jitsu fighter. He's a stone lifter. He is a grip guy, and he has tons of instructional videos. I would highly recommend that because he has more information, and he's just a great guy. I would check out his page. So that would be the lower arm. The next is the upper back. I feel the upper back is very, very important. For a number of reasons. Obviously, if you have strong wrists, but you don't have a strong upper back, you're not getting that off the ground. You just are not. And from another side of it is, myself, for instance, last year I had bicep issues. Basically, the whole stone lifting season I was dealing with seized biceps because my upper back was weak. Now, what happened is once I trained my upper back, I didn't rely on my bicep squeezing as much, and lo and behold, my bicep tendon pain went away. So from the point of getting off the ground, if you can lock your wrists and your upper back, that stone's coming off the ground. Plus, you get that stone to your lap. What do? You roll that stone into your chest, and it goes up from there. So lower arms, upper back, those are very important. And the last thing I would say are the hips. The hips are stronger than the quads. I'm going to touch on this a little bit down in this little spiel I'm doing, but the hips are just stronger than the quad, full stop. Unfortunately, I know you're going to agree with me on this, Troy, but the silver dollar deadlift has become popular in a lot of strongmen. And the reason I bring it up is personally, I'm sorry to anyone that likes that, but that shit just looks ridiculous. Like it does. It's, yes, you can lift over 1,000 pounds, but you're moving it an inch. It's just ridiculous. The point I'm making with this is your hips are so strong that, a 600-pound deadlifter can silver dollar deadlift probably 1,000 pounds because of limited range of movement, but also because the hips are very, very strong. So if you get that stone to your lap, don't think of front squatting it. Think about using your hips, and it's going to go up. So that's my point of view. A lot of people might not agree, but so again, break it down: the muscles, lower arms, upper back, hips. Okay, next we get into the movement. You can have every single muscle in your body dialed in and being strong as hell, but if you do not know the movements of stone lifting, you're not going to be able to lift a stone, right? You take a bodybuilder who trains in complete isolation exercises, and there's obviously bodybuilders that are very, very strong. Don't think I'm shitting on an entire group of people, but if you don't train the movements, you're not going to be able to lift the thing, right? So if we're going to break it down into the movements, to keep it simple, the pick, the stand, and the shoulder. Okay, so the muscles and the movements are things that can be trained in the gym by anybody. You don't need stones to train these. So a good thing to train for the pick would be a flat disc deadlift where you take like a dinny pin and you load all the plates onto it, and then you can practice the pick. That's going to train your upper back. It's going to train your wrists. Alternatively, tip it on its side and you have a squeeze because you're going around the circumference of the plate. That's a bear hug. That's a bear hug deadlift. That's also going to be fantastic for the pick. And also from there is the pendulé rows, or any row flat off the ground, because it's going to train that explosiveness in the backs. Now, moving to the stand. Troy, you mentioned it, and a lot of people may not agree with this. I personally feel Zerchers, squats are fantastic for working on the stand. It's going to blast your hips, your upper back, your core. They're fantastic. Good mornings will also work. A guy like Ryan Stewart, who's big into powerlifting training, he swears by squats and deadlifts, and obviously, look at the man. He's unbelievable and trains unbelievable athletes. Now, if you do have access to stones, sandbags, Atlas stones, stone squats and sandbag squats are a great tool. Troy and I like to do teddy bear squats as well, because when you get up off that low point, you really got to fire your hips in. Also, heavy kettlebell swings work really, really well as well. If you get a stone to your chest and you want to get onto your shoulder, imagine the kettlebell swing, that's the hip height to get it up your chest, right?
Yeah.
The last thing, the shoulder, to be honest, you have to shoulder shit, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's really hard to train. Whether it's a sandbag or an Atlas stone, you need to get something up on your shoulder. I don't know if you feel different, Troy, but...
No, absolutely. Just because, when you're talking about shouldering, you're also talking about 10, 15 seconds of
yes,
the capability that you need to be able to suffer through, not only, on top of all the muscular strength and technique that you need. So, yeah, you need to shoulder stuff, whether that's sandbag, Atlas stone, your kid, anything.
Pretty much anything.
Yeah, dad strength.
Yeah. And, okay, so that's muscles and the movement. And sorry for being long-winded here. I'm trying to give people as much info as they can, but I hope that is helpful for them. So now we get to the meat and potatoes of it. This is the part where you need to be with stones to get good at stones. So skill and technique. I've said it before, stones are a strength puzzle. They require a ton of technique. I mean, everything requires technique. If you've ever seen a toddler try and use a fork, it's hilarious. Even a fork requires technique. Yeah. So of course, maxing out on a stone is going to require technique, right? My personal opinion is one of the best examples of this, of it being an actual technique, is if in 2018, I think it was, at the Arnold's, they had the Odd Hogan Tombstone. And that was to get it to shoulder for reps. Now, I just actually watched the start of that today just to make sure I got it right. That's a 410-pound stone. And these are the strongest guys in the world, okay? And they're using a tacky towel, okay? So the grip element, a lot of it's removed from it. Now, these guys can deadlift from 800 to 1,000 pounds. These guys know Atlas stones. These guys know sandbags. And not only could a lot of them not get it to their shoulder, a lot of them couldn't stand with it, a lot of them couldn't lap with it. There's clearly a technique involved that people maybe don't quite understand. If these guys at that level can't even lap a 410-pound stone, right? So,
which is equivalent to the devil's potato that both of you have stood with multiple times.
And right? Different shape, but still, yes, absolutely. So we're little guys compared to them, and we can do it because we work at this stuff, right? And touching on that skill point is the devil's potato, as Dale mentioned, 409 pounds. I struggled with that all last summer. I just couldn't get it. I would wrestle with it, and I just... same. I know, man. It's a terrible stone. It's big. It's awkward. But then that's where the skill and technique came in, is I got it to my lap, and I grabbed it really hard, and I tried to front squat it up. And I'm not a great front squatter, and I just couldn't do it. And then it clicked one day, is thinking about what... Ed Cohen, who's one of the greatest powerlifters of all time, he says, you don't lift a deadlift off the ground. You don't lift the bar. You bring your hips to the bar. That's the concept of wedging. That's where you get your strength from. And so that I kind of carried over to stones, where I got a stone into my lap. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to lift this. I'm going to try and bring my hips to and under the stone. And what do you know? I don't know if I've missed a stand with that basically since. Because those are little techniques that can go a long way. So for everyone out there, when I talk about hip strength, that's what I'm talking about, is get that stone up high, drop your hips under. And the very last one is the anaerobic capacity, or the grit. And I think anyone that lifts stones has a certain level of grit, because it is ingrained in what we do. And it's awesome. But the point is, can you max effort for long enough to get that stone up? So the best example, I think, is myself for shouldering. In the winter, I hit a 325 stone to shoulder, which was a massive PR to me, and that was a max effort lift. And only a few months later, I shouldered 380 pounds. Now, I didn't get that much stronger, but what I did is I got very comfortable being uncomfortable. I worked on my anaerobic capacity. I worked on my tolerance of discomfort. So I think that's missed in a lot of people. Like, if you think of a max effort stone lift, you're going as hard as you can for 25, 30, sometimes 45 seconds. If you are not fit enough to be as strong as you can for that long, you're not going to get the stone up, right? So really work on your time under tension and wrestling stones in your lap. That's a tool that Ryan Stewart uses, and he's brilliant with this stuff. And if you want to shoulder bigger stones, spend more time with lighter stones on your chest, because that's the hardest part, and then finish the lift. So I hope that, I'm sorry that was long-winded, but I tried to be as thorough as I can and give people a bigger
It was concise.
picture.
It was very concise.
So,
Yeah, it's well laid out. I agree with most of it.
yeah. And again, yeah, you probably won't agree with all of it. I'm sure a lot of people won't. That's just my observations. I tried to take the things I knew and tried to like puke it out onto a page. And that's not really easy. And so maybe it's not that well thought out through, but
I think even, as you two, I haven't been lifting as much lately. Unfortunately, my goalposts for strength have been constantly moving backwards this summer. I was dealing with lower back issues for quite a while, and then when that resolved, I tore my calf playing with my children at the park. So I've been doing a lot of stone lifting, but you guys have been really heavily training for carries. So that required me to be comfortable in discomfort and that time under tension, and essentially being comfortable with the fact that you've got a near 400-pound stone on your chest. You can breathe. You're going to be okay. Fighting that sort of panic mode that your body wants to go in. I know that both of you had to work really hard at that.
it sucks.
It's my least favorite thing to do, but there's been some stuff that I've been doing recently that's not stone lifting associated that actually helps with that. I started doing Wim Hof like religiously, and that is another way of kind of training anaerobically, right? Like
doing Wim Hof breathing.
Wim Hof breathing, right?
Okay,
not in the ice.
I was like, what's he like?
bath.
He sounds like a nice guy.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not Wim Hof.
Okay.
But you know what I mean? Like you end up building tolerance to not having oxygen in your lungs, right? So like you're sitting there and you're in a meditative state, but your body remembers that, right? And so when I started doing that lots, and then I went to start and carry, it was easier. Right? It's really weird how certain things, apart from doing like the air bike and doing cardio and putting stuff on your chest like you suggested, like literally even if you have a 75-pound stone, hike it up on your chest, keep it there, and do high leg marches for as long as you can until you drop it. Like those are the things you need to do to get comfortable with the discomfort of lifting and carrying heavy stuff.
And it is so uncomfortable. Like it's strange. Like you said, I'm just starting to do a lot of this stuff now, and it's weird. Like I have a Husafell trainer, and that's wide enough that I can get my hooks in it, and I've carried the weight of the Husafell just under the distance of it, and my hips burnt out on me, as opposed to my wind, right? But then other stones that we've carried are much lighter than that, and they just sit right on the gut, and then that panic button gets hit because you can't breathe. And so it's very, it's so dependent on the shape of it, and that's what makes it all so interesting. But we're hoping to go to Iceland next year is the plan, the three of us and our good friend Brian, and hopefully take a crack at carrying the Husafell. So we're going to really get comfortable being uncomfortable for that.
Yeah, I mean, but that's one thing that makes the Husafell beautiful. It's heavy, but it's very nice to carry, right?
It looks like it, yeah.
That flat surface, the same as a Husafell trainer or the Husafell style stone that we have to train. Yeah. It makes it much easier to focus on the actual movement and the carry versus struggling to breathe, right? So that's why I think it's so beautiful. It's a 410-pound stone, but it gives you the chance to walk with it.
Gives you a chance, yeah. Well said, yeah.
And then I guess, I know, so some of the questions were about, sort of complementary gym exercises that you use to train for stone lifting or specific kinds of stone lifting. And we kind of, David, you'd covered some of the ones you like to use.
Do you have some you would recommend, Troy?
I mean,
other than the ones,
yeah. I mean, not really, because I've had my warehouse for 3 years now, and it's been solely just training with stones, or body weight exercises and things like that. So I'm not versed in that universe as much anymore.
Yeah. That's why it's interesting to talk to you about it, Troy, because you're kind of on the far end of one side of the spectrum, being that you kickbox, Muay Thai box, you've got into recently, and you lift stones. Versus almost everybody else does other accessory stuff, and here you are, probably one of the stronger stone lifters, just period, doing just those things.
Yeah, and one of the things that maybe you and Troy, I'd like for you to comment on this as well. That people don't, when you talk about the things that people may not come to top of mind when you think about how to increase your stone lifting strength. One of the things was that wrist strength. Another thing that you both mentioned was core strength, and I know David, you had mentioned that was. Working on your core was how you broke through, I don't want to say your shouldering plateau, but how you sort of went, you cranked things up to 11 quite quickly when you started working on your core. What sort of exercises do you both do to increase that core strength?
For me, it's literally, for me, when I'm using stones, it would be the stone squats. Anything that requires your torso to remain in an upright, balanced position, right? Because you're carrying everything as a front load. So it's trying to tilt you over. You need your core and your back and to stabilize that. So doing that repetitively over long periods of time builds a core. I mean, I never felt like I had real man strength until I started stones, because it made my core thick and strong, and I have never felt stronger. So like, I think there's very specific niche things for stone lifters, like the wrists, forearms, core. If you work on those, you're going to be way better off in terms of lifting stones. So, you know, the front squats, you know, even going on a chin-up bar and doing leg raises for 30 minutes and, you know, all that stuff. Sandbag, carries. Yeah.
So Dave, before you go, there's a specific movement that you guys had mentioned earlier, and that maybe, Troy, if you wouldn't mind elaborating on how you do it, because this is something that I know, like the great, powerful Tom Havland has shouted you out about for sort of, showing him this exercise is the teddy bear squat. Like what is involved in doing a teddy bear squat with a stone specifically?
Which is funny because it was a David Horn video.
Yes, it is.
That started that.
Legend.
Because, you know, he's a freak.
Yes.
You know, and I saw that and I was like, hey, let's try it. And me and Dave both tried it right away. I just had the privilege of just talking to Tom Havland one time, and he thought it was cool. But so essentially what you're doing is, I've done it with Atlas stones. So I set up about a 4-inch piece of wood on the ground. Then you pick up a stone, an Atlas stone, a sandbag in front of it. You stand up to chest with it, and then you position your legs. You squat down controlled until your butt hits the pedestal, which is about 4 inches off the ground. Then you have to put your legs out straight. And then you have to bring your legs back in without the stone dropping so low that you can't put your legs back in. And then you have to stand, which is hips and quads. So it's a weird movement to explain in like an audio message, but
you have a lot of videos on your page.
I think me and Dave have both
have
videos on our pages of doing teddy bear squats. Recently we did it at the Granite Garden.
334. We did it with the 334 and then jumped up to the plinth afterwards. which looks stupid, but people don't realize, like, if you can do an explosive exercise, an explosive movement after a near max strength movement, it's a good training tool. But that pedestal was higher. We used a rock. It's probably 12, 13, 14 inches. Is that fair to say? Somewhere in there? Maybe not quite. Maybe around a foot.
Yeah.
A little higher than what
the one that you were sitting
the
on.
The 4.5-inch pedestal is really difficult.
Really difficult.
I almost killed myself trying to do, I didn't do a teddy bear squat, but I took my 260 Atlas stone and I sat and then I shouldered it while sitting and I almost died doing that. So that's another core movement. If you want to do core and shoulder at the same time, sit down with the stone and only use your core and upper body to get it onto your shoulder.
Those are all good examples of core. The ones that I had done is to really ramp it up, and I know I didn't mention it in my 3 muscle groups, but it can't be understated enough. Like Troy was saying, that core is going to be essential. But I did yoke carries in a front rack position. I found that helped a lot. You can do marches if you don't have access to that. Whether it's a barbell, whether it's a stone, anything in a front rack position where there's actual movement involved is going to require a lot more stabilization.
I have another one that just came to mind that I was actually doing during my powerlifting days, which is you take the barbell, you put it extended over your head, and then you do high knee marches with the barbell over your head.
It's a great one.
That was good for my abs. I remember doing that a lot. So there's so many ways to hit your core.
So whether it's simple side bends too, I found that helped a lot. It's a very, very basic movement. Just pick up a kettlebell and work those lateral obliques, right? Like that's, the core is a lot of our muscles. I mean, our lats are part of our core, right? The core goes 360 degrees around our body. So you have to work the front, you have to work the back, and you have to find a way to work the sides. We've both done, this is something that I believe we both got from Tom Havland. We've used it more as a feat of strength, but something people can work in is doing shouldering a stone and doing squats with it on one side. It's very difficult, but that is going to teach you to stabilize stuff. I've seen you, Troy, I believe you shouldered my 309-pound shield stone and did a walk with 309 on your one shoulder in your warehouse that one day. Like anything like that is going to help, right? Anytime you put your body in an awkward positioning, it could be one-arm suitcase carries. Even if you do deadlifts, well, I guess it wouldn't be a deadlift, pardon me, but kettlebell picks on one side. So imagine squatting down, kettlebell just in the one hand, picking it up, and then bringing it to the other side, and then dropping it down, back up, and controlling that. Then you're going to be fighting that rotational twist as well.
Just hearing all this stuff and talking about it like out loud, it just I feel like we're very scientific in the fact that we're always testing new things to try to hit all these muscles, right? Like
We are.
I've made so many contraptions, you've made contraptions.
Sure.
Like even for wrists, I've went to Home Depot and bought 2 4-pound sledgehammers, and I've used those to just hit a pad over and over for hundreds of reps. Like there's so many ways to hit it. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't need to be in a gym. You can make things work.
That's what I do. You talked about doing wrist stuff, watching TV. If I, at the end of the night, have an hour to myself, I'll go watch TV, and I have 2 different size sledgehammers like right next to the couch, and I'll do wrist rotations with a 4-pound or an 8-pound like mini sledgehammer just to do something, right? And that's all it takes, man, is just get it going, build those wrists.
That's part of the beauty of stone lifting, is that it allows for that creativity even during the lifting or how you're preparing for lifting and building your base of strength. And even though it is stone lifting is an activity, as ancient as time itself, doing it as a hobby or from a competitive standpoint is a fairly recent revelation. So there isn't a proven track record that works, and there really couldn't be, because as you both have touched, you both approach it very differently to the same amount of success, and so it gives someone the freedom to be creative and find out an approach that works for them.
Well, and that's why it's so fun, man. Like
Awesome, yeah.
I spend a lot more time like in the garage. Like I just post cool stuff that we do down there. I don't post like all the garage grinding that I do, but like we'll go down and we'll be like, what are we gonna do today? I don't know. We'll both start lifting stones, and one of us will have a crazy idea, and then we'll just roll with it. So, we put the work in one way or another, but we play. Like it's fun, man. It's fun to try different maxes, to push yourself in all these different directions, and just, should we try this today? Sure. What the hell? Let's try a max teddy bear squat and then try to jump up onto a plinth. It's fun.
It's good being seasoned and having the ability. Like we've trained a lot. We have the technique down. We know what we're doing. So like when we go and we're constantly trying new things and doing really heavy stuff that's CNS intensive, that's because we've trained for so long.
Good point.
I would say like for most people that don't have access to stones, I know we were talking about this before, but like people treat it as like a feat of strength and not the actual training itself. And so people will go to a stone and they'll try to lift the absolute heaviest stone they can. But, you have to really dumb it down, and it's about progressive overload, discipline, the same things you would do in a gym, just with stones, right? And so, me and Dave, you see us posting a lot of crazy shit all the time, but that's, there's days where we go and we literally take the 150-pound stone and do rows with it.
Yeah.
And we do light stuff, and you don't, and people on Instagram and things, they don't see that stuff. So, it's really cool though.
It's so fun.
It's really cool.
Yeah. In talking about how you approach your training for stone lifting, if you were to sort of describe an average week, how do you program your lifting for that week?
Me, oof.
Yeah.
See, this is where like I'm really intuitive. I go with what my body feels good on the day. So I don't have set days. Like it's not like a Monday is a chest day, right? But you also have to become really good at this whole RPE, right? And stones and fatigue and working around that. So, I'll do one day where it's more back focused, where I'm just, doing heavy picks and stands and rows. And then there's another day, because I'm only using stones, it's like, okay, now I'm doing overhead day. So, I'll do 200 push-ups, but I'll also do stone presses with, 170 or 180 pounds and 200 pounds. And then there's other days where I'm focusing more on grip, and that's like Atlas stones, wrists, putting your hands in a rice bag and churning, sitting on the couch and doing those wrist things. I'm really just intuitive with my training. And recently, this year, I had the notion before coming out of strongman that being heavy is the best chance at being able to lift heavy. And I've kind of really adjusted that thinking. You know, I've lost 35 pounds this year and I haven't lost an ounce of strength. And it's been way more beneficial to me because I've been focusing on mobility, my cardio. Those things are hugely important to me now because, you know, I like to be humble, but when we're at a level where Dave and myself are at, we're not going to really lose that much strength if we take a little bit of time off stones. And so there's a lot of other things that I've been focusing on more recently, but I'm very intuitive. I listen to my body. You know, I'll go for 2 hours some days and 30 minutes the next. Sure. So, yeah.
That makes sense. Dave,
yeah, how I structure mine is when it comes to training, it depends what your goals are, right? So, for instance, the long-term goal is carrying the Husafel, so that's something that's going to be on my radar. Right now, I'm trying to put on a little bit more muscle, so I'm doing a little bit more hypertrophy. But if I were to break it down, I'm down at this, depending on rain, right? In the summer, I'm trying to be down at our site 1 to 2 times a week. And that's just to play around, have fun, maybe go for a big lift that I want to do. I do a lot of grinding though, whether I'm training at work or in my garage. But one thing I try and do is that every workout, even if I don't touch a stone, it's something that will go towards progressing stones. Mm-hmm. So, you know, even if it's something like a row that right now, for instance, I'm following a Jailhouse Strong program just to build my back up. And those are great programs because they do a lot of hypertrophy, but they also touch on very functional training. And I don't really like the word functional training, but there's movement involved with it as well. It's not just hypertrophy, but I'll try and, instead of just doing a standard row, I'll do it with my palms turned inward because that's more of a stone row. So just being conscious of, okay, what way can I take a normal program and tweak it to help me in stone lifting? So if one day, let's say it's a 5x6 in a squat. Well, I'm going to do that as a stone squat or an atlas stone squat or a sandbag squat. If a carry's programmed in, well, I want to do the Husafel, so I'm not going to be carrying a yoke as much or a trap bar or a farmer's carry. I'm going to be carrying a stone, right? So just really look at the bigger picture and think, you can honestly adjust almost any program out there to be more efficacious towards stone lifting, right? Did I answer that? I kind of got a little lost there.
I think it speaks to another point too, just that a lot of people had asked, how are you training for stones without access to stones? And it is even just when you're doing your exercise, take time to think about the movements you're doing and the range of motion that you're using, and think if there's, portions of that you can adjust, or you can approach differently to help it translate better to stone lifting. So, for example, if I'm doing rows, and before I reach that point of failure, I want to try and do a static hold with that weight as close to my chest as possible to mimic that strength that you need to be able to hold a stone to your chest when you're standing. Little things like that. You're doing gym movements, but then you're thinking yes. Oh, this is analogous to a specific part of stone lifting, so let me focus on that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you need to have multi-plane weight movement. I don't think doing just standard powerlifting is efficacious for stone lifting. You need to start moving in multiple planes. Like you said, if you don't have access to stones, as long as you're moving with weight, doing things that are targeted towards your goal of going out there and lifting the stones, Dave's talking about moving your hands and your arms positioned in a different way because that's how you lift stones. Just be conscious about how you can adapt every single lift or anything to how you're going to lift a stone, and you'll be okay. It's not rocket science. You can do everything and then still get better.
Yeah. There's something called, this is just you had triggered a thought in my mind, Dale, with the holding of the isometric, right? The isometric is something that's used in a lot of things. I think it works really well in stones. There's something called the size principle of muscle recruitment. And so what that means is our bodies are pretty lazy. And so if you do something half-assed, you're going to use the smaller motor neurons and the smaller muscles. But as you go harder and harder and harder, this is something I learned with steel bending because you had to go 110% on those, and that's when your body recruits the bigger things. So as much as you need to train the muscle groups to make sure they're healthy, like you said with the isometrics, at some point you're going to have to get to that level where you're going to have to really go balls out, because that's when your body actually knows how to dig deep. That's where the grit comes from. And with the grit comes those bigger muscle groups that are only there when you really, really, really want to use them, right?
Digging at the bottom of the well.
The one thing I have to say, though, is no gym training ever equals the CNS fatigue I get from lifting stones. That is something that you need to experience by going out and lifting heavy stones for an hour straight. Because I go home, like Dave said, and I literally go do, and it's like an unplanned nap. It's just like your body is so tired.
Standby mode.
Standby. And I don't think I've never experienced that in competitive powerlifting, competitive strongman. Only stones.
And I don't know if I mentioned it in the podcast or not, so I apologize if I'm repeating it, but that's something that I think is so fascinating about stones is even take 75% of your max squat, your max bench, your max deadlift, whatever lift that you like to do the most, and try and make even 75% of that last 30 seconds. You're not going to be able to do it, but that's what stone lifting is. A max effort stone lift is going to take you sometimes 30 seconds to do, right? Like when I shouldered the Agalia, I think that was a 25-second battle under max tension. When I've stood with the potato the first few times, I think it took me 30 seconds to do it. So you just can't, like to your point, Troy, that central nervous system fatigue, and you get a max effort stone into your lap and you're comfortable with it in your lap. You have to wrestle and turn that stone over, and you are just under max tension for so long, and so there's nothing like it. And I think that's why we love it. At least I know that's part of why I do.
100%.
Yeah, and something that I know we've mentioned a couple of times, but even just to sort of touch on specifically is sandbags. So even if you don't have access to natural stones wherever you are and can't purchase or accrue them somehow, you can order sandbags designed for lifting that, then you can go to the beach or the local playground and steal some sand and fill up your sandbag. But I have a 250-pound sandbag here, and that's the only thing that I use to practice shouldering before the Alberta Strongest Viking, where I shouldered a 280-pound stone.
I got the 280 up, that's right.
Gave myself cauliflower here, but I had only practiced with a sandbag, and I found that there was, obviously direct carryover to shouldering.
I agree.
Sandbags are very, very difficult in some ways, kind of
more.
Some may say more difficult than stone because
Agreed.
Your strength is not only going into lifting the sandbag, but you're actually wasting a lot of energy and strength compressing it and shifting it around, whereas a stone doesn't do that.
Completely agree.
Yeah, the sandbags are actually quite difficult. When you get a 300-pound sandbag and it's 4 feet long, it's like a slug on your body. You've got to work it up. I like that the stones are hard and they dig into you. It's a lot easier to kind of position it if you know what you're doing. But sandbags are great. Even for forearms. I go to the gas station during winter time and I buy the sandbags, the 35-pounders, and I literally grab them by the end like a towel carry. And I'll just walk for 20 minutes back and forth. Literally, if you're a creative person, you can train stones with anything.
Well, absolutely.
With this calf injury, I haven't been able to do any stone lifting, and I'm finally just walking without a limp. But I've taken that 250-pound sandbag and I place it on my lap, and then I do with my ass on the floor, seated roll-ups to chest to start working those. To work on my lower back and make sure that I'm maintaining that back strength as well, because there's ways that you can do stone lifting, mimic stone lifting, even if you physically aren't. So
I think you guys are right. The creativity, you can be a little bit creative with powerlifting programming, but not to the same extent as this. And I'm not shitting on powerlifting if anyone's listening, but you're right. There's so many ways to get strong at this.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of manual labor type people, farmers, people that have done sport for their entire life, Dale, he's an amazing wrestler, Dave's a wrestler. I think when you're aware and capable of moving your body the way that you want it to, and you're used to doing things in multiple planes and that manual hard work, those people are more predisposed to doing really well right off the bat with stones. So
agreed.
Go out and do some farm work too. If you want to get good at stones,
just do hard work.
There was nothing more terrifying when you're a wrestler than knowing that you're coming up against someone who is, an equally experienced wrestler and a farmer.
Damn straight.
You're
those
fucked.
farm kids were scary.
Oh man, they're so strong, right? Just that functional, that sinewy tendon strength, right?
Made of wood. They were just hard.
You hate saying functional, but it is
It really is.
It really
It
is
is.
functional.
Yeah.
Right? Like
It's just overused these days.
it is.
Yeah.
Like there's way more people that can lift a 600-pound deadlift than can lift a 350 stone.
There's more people that can lift a 700 probably pound deadlift,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Like it's really, really hard when you get to that level.
Speaking of unique stone strengths, just recently, there was a pretty amazing stone tour that happened in Scotland, and Martin Lises was on that tour, and he, I believe, is the first person ever to shoulder or to press the Menzies stone, and then he also pressed the Fianna stone,
It's wild.
which is incredible. That being said, Troy, you are an incredibly strong. You're incredibly strong at doing stone presses, and you were close to, or you did get a 260 press last year.
Yeah, I've done 260 3 or 4 times. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
which is amazing. Are there certain, again, nothing beats working with the stone, but because a stone press is sort of, I don't know, it's kind of the stepchild when you talk about stone lifts, right? We always talk about wind under the stone,
I've got it.
lapping to chest,
Right.
shoulder. No one really talks about the stone press because it is,
point.
not many people can do it, but were the things that you did to build up that strength, or was that a lot of carryover from powerlifting or strongman?
It was. I really had bad knee problems, and that made me do all of my pressing strict.
Okay.
And that is an absolute requirement to press stones unless you want to take a rock to the dome. Because if you start doing the same things people do with a log with
Right.
a stone,
Yeah.
you're going to drop that thing on your head
Right.
and you're going to get hurt.
gonna
And
slide
so
through your hands, yeah.
I've done all of my pressing since the very beginning strict because I had my knee issues. And now with being more mobile, I have less knee issues. So my recommendation, if people want to get into the crazy world of stone pressing, is strict pressing. Anything. Barbell, log. I mean, you can do log because it's better. Your hands are more in alignment with how you would press a stone, but strict. Do everything strict. Seated, incline bench.
Yeah.
If you're in a gym, do that religiously, but everything strict.
That's
Yeah.
I would agree with almost the only I cheat a little bit with stone pressing. Because I'm nowhere near as strong at strict pressing as Troy is. I certainly don't push press because I don't want to wear stone as a hat. But I do find if I arc my body far enough back and keep that stone obviously over the center of mass, I'm actually able to use my core muscles and almost shoot myself forward. And because the stone is at enough of an angle, I can get a little. It's not the pop of using your knees in a push press, but it simulates that because I just don't have the strength coming off. I've done what I did a set of 2 at 235 for a stone. It's nothing
Which is
like
still
Troy.
still
That's a
amazing.
lot, yeah.
Not bad for. I think I was 205 pounds at the time, but still, it's Troy. I think to roundabout, Troy is right. If you are really, really good at strict pressing, you're going to be a better stone lifter than if you need to be like myself, who tries to recruit the tension from somewhere else.
Yeah, the other thing is with the stone press, I throw the stone from my lap up because
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
like having the stone. My arms are very long, and so it's really difficult for me to position my hands like a block press to try to get my hands under the stone. So, which has helped all of my other lifts because I've adapted and have this explosive power out of the hole to be able to throw the stone up. But like you said, it's basically we get into an inclined press position. We're leaned back. We're using our core and our hips and butt to stabilize it. So when you're pressing and you're leaning back, I flex my glutes super hard, and it kind of creates that shelf. But then it's strict from an almost inclined position. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean it's a really niche part of stone lifting, but there's nothing more satisfying. I don't even think the devil's potato is more satisfying than lifting a 260-pound stone over your head. I felt like
That's big.
Superman.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
I mean,
big.
you are, because there are very few people on the planet that can do that.
Yeah,
So
it's a big
yeah.
press, man. That's a big press.
Got a couple last sort of general questions, then I'll go to one sort of specific scenario that someone had sent us in. David, you had mentioned sort of hips and upper back as two of the key things that you need to focus on increasing your strength for. Are there specific accessory movements that you do for upper back and for hips to support your stone lifting?
Pardon me. So for upper back, I think as I mentioned, the plate, the flat disc deadlifts, I think are going to be great. You can use that to train your high end. You can use that for rows. You can do a lot with that. I think that's going to work really well. I don't do as much of that now because my back is in a place where it's strong enough to lift what I need to lift at the time. But I think for anybody who finds that as a weakness, that's going to be a great tool. Again, pendulum rows are great because they're a little bit more explosive. Other than that, not really. Like you can do
hips? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, for hips. Yeah. So for hips, none of that will work your hips, but Zerchers are going to be fantastic for your hips. Okay. Again, heavy kettlebell swings. If you don't have access to a real heavy kettlebell swing, what I was doing leading into your competition, Troy, was I took my Denny plate post, and you can put, you're not going to be able to put 45s on there, but I would put 15 kilos, so 33 pound, and 10 kilos, which is 22, and was working up to, I think heavier sets at, 15 reps at like 125, 130 pounds. So that's going to be really good for your explosiveness of your hips. But again, you can also work your hips with rack pulls. You can work it with a lot of things, like just a standard deadlift, right? Just build strong hips.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where we are very different, right?
Sure.
Like my hips are probably the weakest in my chain, and I rely heavily on my core, my quads,
sure,
and my back. Like I'd never train upper back because that's something that I've just genetically been gifted with, right? So, yeah, I mean, if you watch me and Dave lift, he's very technical. Like with the potato, he gets it into a position where his hips are in a good spot, and he uses that very well to get it up. And like when I lifted it, I'm right out of the hole, quads, struggling the whole way. Just because like
your ass almost suctioned to the ground. You were so low.
Yeah, it's just my hips. That's what I should probably be doing is the kettlebell swings and all that stuff. But that's my one lazy. It
works for you though, man. We lift totally different. We lift the same stuff, but in a very different manner.
That's beautiful, right? That's awesome.
It's awesome.
So specific scenario question. So this is from Ronaldo Pegueda, who comes to us from the Philippines. He said, "Hey guys, I've only got 2 stones in my garage that I can regularly train with. One is 77 pounds, the other is 130. It's rare that I get to head out of the city to find and take home more stones. You could probably check your local playground as or school yard, as Troy has told us. At the moment, the 130 pounder is quite challenging, though I wonder how I can progress should the time come so that the 130 pounder becomes easier to lift. Should I increase the tempo that I lift my stones at, lift them with more sets and reps? How can I maximize training with only 2 stones within reach? Much love from the Philippines."
Very cool.
Yeah.
Troy, you want to start off, man?
With 77 and 130, I would be doing lots of rows, bent over rows with the 77 pound to build up your upper back. I would also be doing lots of sets of picks to the lap with the 130 to get that motion down. If you can't stand up with it, that's fine. Just start moving the reps, getting it off the ground, getting air beneath it, getting it into your lap, and sitting there with it. Yeah. One of my favorite warm-ups is literally putting a heavier stone in my lap, sitting there and getting used to the weight. If you're able to stand up with the 130, Dave mentioned, I've mentioned, literally get it up to your chest and stand there for as long as you can. Let it press into your chest until it's uncomfortable. Do high leg marches with the stone. Carry it. Those are, a couple things, and you'll get drastically better in a short period of time.
Yep, everything Troy said there, and I mean, just like with any amount of or any training program of any kind, you just have to change the variables to change the load. Whether you make the lifts a lot longer, whether you do them in speed succession, whether you shorten the rest time, you increase the reps. There's a lot of ways to make it more difficult. Again, time under tension is huge. If your goal, I believe he said it was a little bit difficult to lift. Is that right?
He said specifically, at the moment, the 130 pounder is quite challenging.
Okay, so I'm assuming to stand with.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, take your time out of your lap. Don't be in a rush. That's something I think that I'm sure you have the same observation, Troy, and you as well, Dale. But when we have new people come down, guys that are very, very strong, they get into their lap and they panic. Because they're like, oh, shit, now what do I do, right?
Yeah.
Because they're unfamiliar with it. So take your time with the lift, slow it down, be very comfortable with it, and when he's ready, shoot up either quick, shoot up slow, do it from a box. Like there's a million ways to change the lift with only 2 options. Like 2 different stones, you break down the stone lifting, there's a lot of different movements within it.
Yeah.
And you can change the tempo and the speed and the everything.
Take time wrestling with that 77 pounder. Sure. If you can get that to your lap fairly easily to make that a bit more difficult.
Do stone squats with it.
Yes. Yeah. Wrestle, bring it up, do stone squats.
Yeah, but honestly, like if you can get a stone into your lap, like what Dave said, you're not going anywhere. It's very comfortable to keep basically any weight of stone in your lap. So if you get comfortable with just being in that position and just being calm, that's going to help you all the better.
Yeah,
just don't rush.
Yeah, and even and it may not be a strength thing, right? Like David, you've talked about there's the strength aspect, but then there's the technique aspect, and something that you had coached me on. And I know Troy, you're saying like you do it very differently. You're sort of all quads and explode from ass to grass a lot of times, but instead of going into a deep sit with the stone on your lap, is doing being a little bit more upright, and then actually sort of shuffling that stone up your quads so that it does sit tight on your hip bones, and then standing from there. So you're almost at a half stand already. Yeah. That was something that David had coached me on when I tried, the Nisbet stone that he has in his garage, and it worked really well. Like I was almost already at a standing position.
That's that, coming from the Ed Cohen side of things, we're bringing your hips to the stone, right? Like if you can get that much closer to the end of the lift before you have to do it, well, then you're in a better, using your body.
You guys are much more tacticians than I am. I'm literally just like Troy C. Rock, lift rock.
And you can do that, right?
Whereas, you're a Gronk, man. We have to be more tactical.
But you see, I've seen a lot of videos of people failing at standing with a stone because they're trying to stand and lift it, and it's all arms because the stone is multiple inches away from their stomach. They're not pressing it into their body.
That's a big thing I see all the time.
Yeah.
People leave their arms like it's weird. It's like they lift it into their lap and then they let their arms go floppy and then it falls forward. It's like you need to be, and this could be a good gym thing, right? You're doing rows, like a barbell, like a seated row. That's the same movement when you're in tension at the very end of that lift into your chest. That's the same that you want with the stone.
What I was mentioning. What I'll do is I'll do seated row, and I'll stop, maybe 2 reps before failure and just hold it.
Yeah.
And hold it there for as long as I can until that's my point of failure, until I can't hold it there anymore, rather than going for that hypertrophy. I'm doing that static hold at the end, and I found like that's helpful.
That's that grit. That's that anaerobic conditioning of your muscles, because you're training that that's what I've been doing a lot more, at least with some of the videos that I've posted, where I'll do like a couple lifts of a stone and then go for the heavy one. Because if you're already fatigued by the time you're doing the max effort thing, you're just going to be conditioning yourself better. That's exactly what you're talking about with that row. You're building up the lactic acid in your muscles, and then you're finishing at the very end when you're already fatigued with a strong isometric hold.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, and I guess this is kind of opens up a topic that we hadn't intended on touching on, but are there other common traps you've seen stone lifters falling into, or techniques that you see quite often that you'd like to sort of try to shed some light on?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I mean, like one of the biggest things is people treat it like a feat of strength. Mm-hmm. You don't always have to treat it like you're on a stone tour in Scotland and you're trying to lift all of these amazing historic stones. Right. Like it's not what it's about. So if you're constantly going out and banging your head against the wall and failing all the time, you're not going to get better. And a lot of people that are newer to stones get into that trap, right? Yeah. They rush, I've seen it. They rush. Like people will come to the Granite Garden and they want to go from the 150 all the way to the 330 in the first day that they come, right? So people have to realize that it's not like that. You're going to either get hurt or not progress if you're always trying to max out on stones, and that's so common. That's why people don't progress. You need. Just because you see videos every day, like social media is horrendous for this.
Yeah,
the perceived what people are doing every day. Like Dave and me don't max out every day, not even every week. But just people get the perception that that's okay, but it's not. You have to be doing all this other shitty work and the accessories and putting your hand in a bag of rice for 30 minutes to get those wrists up.
If you want to get to the highest possible level that you can. That's the thing. Like if people want to go and just do a feat of strength, cool. But there's so much, like you said, Troy, like just that the labor of love that takes to get to that level where you have to grind and grind and grind. And why would anybody, like, not to make it all about social media, but that's where people see these big lifts.
Yeah.
But why would anybody post, well, here's me doing my third set of 5 of rows? No one's gonna, like, why would you post? Nobody wants to see that shit.
Yeah,
right. It's the fun
people
stuff.
Aren't seeing the grind that you guys are putting in between, right? And even if you are posting infrequently, like let's say once a week or once every 2 weeks, that's probably because that's the only time you guys are doing those sort of
that's the coolest thing I've done.
You're not doing them every single day and only showing a portion of that that is sort of, that's the final boss of you guys on a given week, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of grinding to it, and you know that well too, Dale. Like, you grind just as hard as we do, man. Like, it's and then every once in a while it's fun to go for something big, because that's the stuff you think about. You don't think about, well, okay, I'm gonna have to bust my ass doing all these small accessories for tomorrow, but you think about the horse chasing the carrot type thing. You're like, okay, that's the one I'm going for. I'm gonna like, there's some workouts that like, if a Saturday's coming up and I know we're gonna go training, I might skip other workouts to save my central nervous system for that, right? Like, it's very rare that you can absolutely max out, right? Like, your body has to be in the exact right slot. And so sometimes that might mean just, okay, well, I'm not going to work out these 2 days prior. Oh, my buddies are going out I'm going to stay at home. Like, the amount of social things, like, it sounds really silly, just for a Saturday morning training event, because that's more important to me than going for a couple beers with the boy. I love going for beers with the boys, but I just mean, like, if I want to do the big thing, that's going to be my focus.
And you have to be okay with also planning to do the big thing and not being able to, or not feeling it. We've gone to the site so many times and been like, today I wanted to lift a potato, but I have it in my head and I'm smart enough to realize that I can't do it today. So let's do the other boring accessory work. I think people need to be more patient, and it's not even, it would never be as satisfying or fun if you could just do everything right away.
No, it wouldn't. And on that note, Troy, like, this is something I got from steel bending. If I couldn't complete a certain bend or whatever, but I like to try and do that with the stones. So, like, let's say for a certain day I did want to lift the potato to the plinth or whatever. I wanted to shoulder this stone, I couldn't get it. Instead of just being pouty about it and going, well, shit, there goes that day. You go, okay, there's so many more elements to stone lifting, that, okay, well, maybe I'll transition from that and I'll work on my carries, or I'll work on this. So you can just, definitely, you're right, 100% right, Troy. You can just go and be like, okay, well, today I'm going to do some rows. Or you shift gears and go, okay, what's a different way I can attack this workout to try and finish on a positive? Because that's going to make you feel a lot better in the long run. It's just shift gears. Recognize that your nervous system or your body's banged up is the way that you are that day, and go, okay, what can I do within the confines of my body right now and these tools around me to at least leave this a positive experience at the pouty one?
Do something every day, even if it's not to your 100% capability.
Sure.
The other thing is, like, surround yourself with people that will motivate you and keep you honest, right? Like, I have been extremely fortunate to meet all these amazing gentlemen that have pushed me and kept me honest. And, there's certain days where you've told me, hey, you need to lay back, and I've done the same thing for you guys.
For sure,
it's so anybody listening out there, the whole stone community is super friendly. So if you don't have that person in your day-to-day life to keep you honest and, like, make sure you're doing stuff, you always can message anybody in the stone community and be like, I need your advice. Am I doing something wrong? They'll be perfectly blatantly honest.
I almost guarantee almost every single stone lifter out there would be happy to have a conversation with someone about stones.
Absolutely.
That's why there's a podcast about it. People just like talking and listening to this stuff, man.
And something else too, just talking about sort of Instagram and the stone lifting community. Something else for people to keep in mind, I'm sure, as most of the people listening to this are adults, they understand this, but just to reiterate, like, don't fall into this sort of Instagram syndrome where you're comparing your achievements with somebody who lives across the globe, living under completely different circumstances that you are, with different experience level, different size, different access to training implements. Like, appreciate your achievements within the context of your own life and your own situation, right? Like, I almost get an in-person dose of that when I go and lift with you guys, because you guys are experienced, you're incredibly strong, and you're lifting like world-class heavy stones. I'm not there yet, but when I lift something, I go like, this is, considering the limited time I've been doing this, and, I'm a wiry 205 pound, like, it's just,
and you're one motioning a 335.
Yeah. So, I haven't one motion. That's the next
okay, well, you're really
close
to it.
When I come away from the granite garden, it's like, oh, Troy and Dave lifted the potato, and it's like, I'm happy of the progress that I made, because I made progress.
No. Like, that's the whole reason why I started Alberta's Strongest Viking, and I'm sure that's also why Dave started the Gathering, his event. It's like, come and be around people that may or may not be better than you, but it doesn't matter. Like, we're all supportive, right?
Yeah.
Do things for you. That's the main thing that I hated about Instagram and competing. It feels so disingenuous that like it feels like 90% of the people that compete don't compete for themselves. And so, you know,
get a t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Like our like the gathering, even more specifically, is there's no prizing. It's just come, do your best on the day. There's going to be people better than you, but just do something for you. And I think by taking away the aspect of first, second, third, or whatever, it makes people a lot more comfortable. And I think that's what makes stone lifting more approachable. It's
you against the stone, like you against the other 100%. People that are lifting.
I don't like, it doesn't bother me if Dave hits the Agale to shoulder. Yeah. I'm like, I'm working on this today for myself. I'm really happy for Dave. Yeah. Or today Brian lifted the netter stone, and Dale one motion this and that. Like, I'm super pumped for you guys, but like, I'm also focusing on the specific things I want to, right? So it's so different.
Yeah, and that's I've said it before, and I will repeat myself because I think this is very important. Is one of the best stone lifts I've ever seen is Brian, our buddy Netter. Yeah. That's why we named the stone after him. We call it the Netter Stone because
his Instagram handle is Netter.
But also but we named the stone after him because one of the, he lifted a 272 to chest, and that's not that heavy, but at his time, for his experience level, that was great. And he had an unbelievable battle with that stone, and that is what it's about. It really doesn't matter the weight of the stone. It doesn't matter. It could be a 115-pound stone or a 400-pound stone. If you watch somebody just have a battle with it,
did not give up.
That is what it's. That is it. It doesn't, and that's to your point, Dale, about that is like it. Don't compare yourself to others. Just honestly, like if you are going super hard and you're progressing, that's what it's about. Just do what you can. And you know what? Every stone's different. We have like our 334. I'm going to be honest, and I think you guys will both agree. It's almost a cheater 334. Yeah. It's 334 pounds. It's absolutely weighed and accurate, but there's handles on one side and it's round on the other. So it's easy to pick and it's easy to roll up. And every stone is different. There's horrendous stones that weigh lighter and hard ones, like heavier stones that are easier. Just, you can't compare.
And just, touching on that progression, right? Like, Brian now plays with that stone.
Yes, he sure does.
A year ago, he had an incredible battle. He dug deep. He showed incredible grit and resolve, and he got the lift. And now it's no problem. He shoulders it, no problem, right? So it's just sort of sticking with it, understanding what's achievable in the context of your experience and your strength, and then just working at it.
Yeah,
work at it. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Encourage other people, but don't burden yourself by comparing yourself to others. So
it's like anything. Is there any other training questions?
That's it. I think we covered all of them and then some. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple more things I just want to touch on. I think we kind of maybe rushed over slightly the Edmonton Stones of Strength at the start because we were really excited to talk about training because there was a lot of people curious about that. But yeah, like we kind of had the idea of it, and it's grown into so much. And like I think like our goal, like when we were parsing out the ideas, Troy, was basically to provide world-class strength, challenges here, right? And I think that's something that we have done as a team. There's been 5 of us that have really got into that. Myself, Troy, you, Dale, Brian, and Sarah, and we've all worked together to try and build this up and provide all these opportunities, and we've got really, really good feedback. And that leads me to the next point about the gathering that we have coming up. And Troy, you'd said that the event that I'd planned, but this all came again from your idea last year. I remember you had that idea of having a gathering in Edmonton, and that was right before we went to Scotland, and I just jumped on it, like, let's do it. And so once again, that came from your idea, but we have our second gathering coming up on September 9th, and pretty excited about it. Like, it's going to be fun. And again, just the concept of the event is, it's based off of the one in Scotland. And we very kindly got permission from the gentlemen, Brett and Stevie, there to use that name. But it's just, there's the fact, like you said, Troy, there's no first, second, third. Last year was so cool. We had all of these people come out and everybody just busted their ass and worked as hard as they could. And it was just a really, really cool outcome. And so, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that briefly. Like,
it's a beautiful thing. Like, it's so inspiring to just the Scottish dudes getting together, just being a community, drinking, having fun. And like that is why historical stones are cool, because people 200 years ago were doing the same thing. Let's go down to the field and let's have drinks and lift the fucking rock. Like it's just evolved over time. And that's why it's so cool, because there's no, yes, at the end of the day you feel manly or whatever, but like it's all personal, but it's also community. Right? Like I largely hate people, but I love lifting stones with people, right? So it's really weird. Like I like that whole community aspect, and it's very genuine. That's what I like about it. I don't like any disingenuous stuff. And it's very genuine and heartfelt, and it's historically connected, and it's awesome.
Yes, it is.
Big portion of my closest social circle now at this point in my life revolves around our group lifting stones. Right? Like that's one of the only constant, get-togethers of friends that I have when I can, Saturday mornings, lifting stones. When I start a long day of work on Monday, I'm like, just got to get through this. Lift stones on Saturday, right? So, awesome.
And that's, everyone out there listening, like we didn't have this up until recently here, right? So Troy started his competitions, what was it, 2020?
Yeah,
is that right?
So, yeah.
2021 was your first competition.
21, 22, 23, yeah.
Yeah, so 2021, and we just started Edmonton Stones of Strength last year. So we didn't have, this wasn't here. And I'm very proud of what we've done in just like, it's basically been just over a year. If you think about it, we started at the very end of April in 2022, and here we are in August 2023, and we have people flying from different parts of the country to come do our event. It's not a competition. They don't get anything out of it other than camaraderie and lifting. And so if anyone's listening out there, you can do this too. It's fun. Like the amount of hours that I've spent trudging through the bush with a backpack with a scale and digging up stones, it's been fun. Like it's
treasure hunting.
It is. That part of it's fun too, right? And it's you guys, you can do it.
From stealing stones from a school to exploring the forest and looking for stones.
We are simple men.
Yeah, but like it's just testament to the fact that anybody can do it.
Yes.
Like we all started as complete newbies, buying stones off Kijiji and going to the landscaping company and spending $20 on light rocks just to start training, to discovering this amazing like glacial deposit of beautiful stones and finding that perfect little location. Like once we found that, like it's magical being in there. There's something about walking in there and having a fire and connecting like primally in that nature, and also having all those amazing stones. Like it's evolved so rapidly, and it's amazing. It's awesome.
Yeah, I don't want the evolution to stop, man. It's so much fun.
There's more to come for sure.
There's more stones in the bush, and it's
many stones for us to lift locally and afar. So
and you know what? That's actually one of the questions that Sean Urquhart had asked. He was wondering if do you have any plans for any historical lifts? Any trips?
Well, hopefully we get to go to Iceland.
Yes.
The Husa Fellowship.
Yeah, the Husa Fellowship. 100%.
That's the plan we have.
We basically have like Aragorn and Legolas and an orc and a dwarf. So we're ready to go.
That would be pretty rad trip. It's got to happen, man.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be several opportunities to become a true full sturker.
Yes.
And I think that's a big thing. The Dinnies would be great. Going over to Scotland, I think that's secondary for me. Iceland, ever since I watched Full Sturker and Stefan Solvi, and even from him, that's why I started training wrists, because when he goes up to Dridvik and he has Full Sturker, he's like, you need strong wrists to be able to lift this.
Right.
He's like, a lot of strong guys can't lift this because their wrists. So I'm like,
about that. Yes.
And I am very hooky. Like I keep my wrists 90 degrees, and it's because I've watched a lot of that stuff, and Iceland is it for me.
That would be a very, very cool trip. So many ways to become full sturker, to go do some of those, see the country, and oh man, what an amazing time that would be.
Absolutely.
And then Ireland someday in the future.
Oh yes,
You just want to go over just to hang out with David for a while. Around, right? Sean's trip he keeps finding more. Like that's just such an insane momentum.
He can tell me stories.
Yes, it's just
the momentum that's going on over there. Like there's this historical cultural revolution happening where people are contacting him now, like, and he's finding just every weekend there's a new stone. The one he just found, this anchor stone. Have you seen that just ancient dragon talon looking thing? Like, you can just imagine people hundreds of, possibly thousands of years ago lifting that thing. Like,
if it's that worn down, man.
You could tell where it was anchored in it.
That's what's
so the rope mark.
Absolutely
so cool.
Wild, man. How many ropes did that thing have to go through to get that kind of work, man?
Exactly.
A lot. Many ropes.
Test these ropes on it one day.
Awesome.
Well, let's wrap it up. Yeah, thank you so much for coming, Troy. That was awesome. Is
there anything else you want to say? Any shout outs, any comments, questions, anything like that?
No, it was a pleasure being on here. If anybody has questions, just hit me up. It's beard_and_boulder on Instagram. Or any of us if you want to chat stones or need advice. But don't overcomplicate it. It's very simple.
Yeah.
Treat it the same way as you treat any other stuff. Progressive overload, discipline, grit. You're good, basically.
Beautiful. Let's end it there.
Good. All right.
Thanks.
All right. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be so kind as to leave the show a review and then follow us over on Instagram at stonesofstrength_podcast.